They're also recording.
Yep. Thank you for joining. We'll start in just 1 minute as we get people logged in. Thank you. Well, thank you for joining us today. Well, we have people still logging in, but we need to get started. We need to be cognizant of the time of our distinguished guests here today. I want to thank you all for joining BIASC, today's webinar about how we're going to do business in California. How are we going to move forward as a business community, as a society, not just under the COVID conditions that we're in now, but what are we going to do after the COVID conditions? And we have a very distinguished panel with us here today that represent the business community, the business interests here in California, and represent the business community in Sacramento. We have us first is Dan Dunmoyer, who is the CEO of the State BIA. And Dan is our fearless leader up in Sacramento. He's going to talk to us today about what is going on in the housing policies and how it's going to affect us here in Southern California. And we're really happy to have Dan with us here today. Marty Wilson, Vice President of the California Chamber of Commerce. Marty is an icon in Sacramento, just like Dan. If you ever heard the term job killer bills, job killers, this is where Marty is. Marty is kind of the arm and fist of the political movement for the California Chamber of Commerce. And we're very, very lucky to have him here today as well. We also have Rob Lapsley, president of the California Business Roundtable. They are pretty much the beacon of the business community in Sacramento and the state, representing all of the business interests, including the BIA as well. And then last but not least, we have Rex Hime, CEO of the California Business Properties Association. Rex is kind of like the Wyatt Earp, Sacramento. Very, very, very strong opinion and very, very aggressive as he protects the interests of his association, and is truly an icon. I mean, we basically to have all these individuals on the call is great. They're kind of like the last Jedi of the business community. So they will have a lot of information to provide us. Please use the Q&A. You may type those in and we'll try to get those answered towards the end of it. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dunmoyer to open up about what he's seen in his organization. And then after we do a round of introductions, we'll have some questions prompts. So Mr. Dunmoyer, I'll leave it over to you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Although the last Jedi, if I remember Jedi watching the movie, they all pretty much got wiped out except for maybe one. So I don't know which one of us will be left standing. Maybe you. But thanks, Jeff, for the kind of invitation. Thanks for the collaboration. And I'm honored to join my colleagues who are consistently and collaboratively fighting the good fight for the business community in Sacramento and throughout California. Again, thanks to you, Jeff, and your leadership and partnership on a number of local and statewide issues, and really appreciate that collaboration and team spirit. So I have a few quick things just to kind of bring you up to speed on where we are in the state of California and housing. Housing continues to be an essential component of California's business climate, even during the COVID crisis. And I mention it only because the governor continues to turn the dimmer switch. I'm not sure if it's up or down, but he refers to as dimmer switch, which he's restricting and causing greater limitations on activities in an effort to counter the COVID crisis. Within that context, he continues to allow for home building and construction in general to be essential. But I mention this again just because as we watch what's happening in California and in other Southwest and Western states, there is greater concern about the spread of COVID, and that obviously puts pressure on politicians to address it and causes us concern about whether or not parts of the state may try to limit the construction industry. So we're continuing to work in that space. We're about ready to release our second survey of home building and construction in general from a health perspective. The good news is it's still safer to be in the building industry, whether on the job site as a subcontractor all the way up to an employee in the CEO level. It's still 2.5 times safer to be in our profession actively engaged in business than it is as a regular citizen sheltering in place. Last time we did the survey in April, it was 5 to 1 better. Now it's 2.5 to 1. So it's still a better position. But it is something we are going to work behind the scenes to communicate with opinion leaders so they continue to maintain housing and construction in general as an essential business. Two other things I just want to mention, just on the legislative front. The world is starting to move into a final funnel factor. What I mean by that is the legislature is at least currently scheduled to come back next week. And I mentioned that currently because they were supposed to come back this week. And there are members in the legislature who have tested positive for COVID, and there are staff members and staff sergeants. So it's a precarious time for the legislature, but the speaker has recently, yesterday, said he does not feel that they can vote remotely. And so as a result of that, plans to bring back the state assembly to discuss issues. There's about 3 times more more assembly measures and Senate measures. So we're starting to enter into what we refer to as the bicameral food fight as to which house is more important. When it's just Democrats, now they fight over which house is more important. And so the Senate versus the Assembly, it's almost like a scrimmage. But there are a couple of bills I want to bring to your attention. Our primary support in housing creator bill is Senate Bill 281 by Senator Scott Wiener, happens to chair the Senate Housing Committee. This is a measure to extend all permits, all MAP acts, all approved entitlement projects that were approved at the start of the COVID crisis, and to continue them on well into next year and to the end of next year. This includes both commercial mixed use as well as residential construction. This measure is scheduled to be heard the first week of August, but we've been working tirelessly, and particularly Nick Camarota and Michael Gunning. There were 8 hours of negotiations yesterday with the league, CSAC, the counties, the Rural Counties Association, and also with the committee to try to finalize that measure. So far, none of those major organizations are opposing those extensions, so we're working to get that across the finish line. On the housing killer side, I just want to mention we still have a measure that's moving forward, AB 2231 by Assemblymember Kalra. This is the 4th effort by labor to expand the use of prevailing wage for residential construction in the event that you use a de minimis amount of public funds. So it narrows that de minimis definition. If you use no public funds, this doesn't apply to you, but if you use any public funds, which includes solar rebates or credits or other activities, it would kick your project into prevailing. So Jerry Brown, as governor, vetoed it twice. Gavin Newsom vetoed it last year, but labor is still pushing this measure. It's still moving forward. And anything that expands prevailing wage, we're opposed to, especially in this context that if you're using energy efficient resources and get some sort of a rebate for that, it could kick your project into prevailing, which disincentivizes you for being environmentally friendly. Last measure I'll mention, it's kind of a sleeper, but it's a profound measure. It's AB 168 by Aguiar Curry. It's a measure that right now would apply to giving Native Americans complete veto power over any project that is SB 35 related. We're opposed to this measure. We're asking that, we right now have under California law the right for Native Americans to bring issues forward under CEQA, but there's an appeal process that allows us to eventually prevail if we can make the case that it does not negatively impact Native American burial sites. This would just give complete fiat to Native American tribes to shut down a project forever without any appeal right, even to the Supreme Court of California. So right now it's limited SB 35, but they've now looked at two other measures, they being the Native American groups, to limit and give them total fiat. And so that's a challenge we're focused on. So you'll probably hear my little puppy go crazy here in a second. My apologies, but let me stop there and turn it back to you, Jeff. And I'll be glad to answer any questions at the appropriate time. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate that insight. And please, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A prompt so we can answer them as much as we can towards the end of today's webinar. Next up is Marty Wilson from the California Chamber. He's going to be sharing a couple of slides. Make no mistake that, there's lots of policies, good and bad ones coming out of Sacramento. There is an election coming up, and there's a lot of important candidates that are running for office in this election that we need to support or not support. It's up to you. So with that, I'll turn it over to Marty. Thank you.
Thanks. Am I sharing the screen? I can't quite tell. Can you guys see these? No? Okay, let's see if we can get our, we've been very successful at this, so I'll try share screen. Oh well. That's not gonna work. I've failed at this numerous times. So I'll talk a little bit about the legislative races of interest. And most of the competitive races that we at Cal Chamber and the rest of the business community are focused on are in Southern California. Orange County, once again, will be a major battleground area for the state. But, just kind of giving you the broad overview. We do have two open state Senate seats in the north. Senate District 5 is a Stockton-based seat, fairly safe Democratic seat. Susan Eggman is running against Jim Ridenour. It's been a Democratic seat represented by Kathleen Galgiani for the last two terms, and she's been a pretty good vote. I mean, her Cal Chamber vote record, she was with us 10 times and not with us 8 times, but for a Democrat, that's pretty good. We hate to see her go. Eggman is somebody who, we can work with, but she's, decidedly a lot more progressive. And so we consider that a step back. Fortunately, we've made some inroads in some other Democratic seats. Senate District 13, which is a safe Democratic seat. We were successful in the primary, getting a fellow by the name of Josh Becker through. This is one of 2 Silicon Valley based districts, and we created a Silicon Valley Jobs Pact just to focus exclusively on SD 13 and 15. Becker's running against a Republican. It's a safe Democratic seat. Becker's got an MBA and a JD from Stanford. He's the kind of person you would think, you'd like to think that Silicon Valley would send to Sacramento. Ironically, they haven't historically. So we feel good about that. Senate District 15 is San Jose based, Santa Clara County seat. We have Ann Ravel running against Dave Cortese. Some of you in the building industry may be familiar with Cortese. He's been on the Board of Supervisors. I think he's finishing up his 3rd term. But from the business community point of view, we like Ravel. We think she'll be a better representative for the area. Cortese has taken almost $800,000 from labor between police unions and SEIU. They're basically funding completely his campaign. Ravel is kind of a maverick type. She's a former county attorney. She served in the Obama administration, served in the Jerry Brown administration. She is opposed, would have voted against AB 5, the contracting out, the Dynamex legislation. She's opposed to split roll, which is unique in the Democratic Party. To find somebody to come out against that. So we feel that, based on her background and where she is philosophically, she'll be a much better fit for that district than the outgoing incumbent, a fellow by the name Jim Bell, who I've been in this job since 2012, and I have to admit I've never met the guy. I don't even know what he does, what he looks like. But Moving into Southern California, we've got basically Republican seats that have to be defended. Scott Wilk up in the Santa Clarita area had a really strong performance in the primary. He's a Republican running against a Democratic trial lawyer by the name of Kip Mueller. We think Wilk's in good shape, but there's no such thing in California as a safe Republican seat. Maybe in Kern County, and that's about it. We have another open seat, the Morrell seat out in the Inland Empire, Rancho Cucamonga area. Republicans did very well in recruiting a candidate by the name of Rosalicia Ochoa Bogue. You may remember Russ Bogue, that's his sister-in-law. Latina, very, very sharp young lady, and we're happy that she made the runoff. She had a challenging primary, but got through that. She's running against a lady by the name of Abigail Medina, who's kind of what you would expect, the Democrats to put up, and we think Rosalicia has a good chance there. Kind of the marquee Senate race, moving down more closer to Orange County, is Ling Ling Chang, is her third matchup against Josh Newman. He's running again. Newman, had a primary challenge. He only got a third of the vote in the March primary. Ling Ling's, we think doing a good job. She's raising money, working hard, but that's got to be that's the Democrats' number one priority race, because Tony Atkins feels like she got dealt a bad hand from the handoff from Kevin De Leon, and her first action was to defend Newman in a recall, and of course he had some bad votes, voted for the universal health care measure among other things, and so that'll be a pretty hotly contested race. The Costa Mesa area, John Morlock is on the ballot. He's running against Dave Min. Again, this is not a safe Republican seat. It's about a 50-50 split. Min is a UCI law professor. Nice man. I've met him. I liked him. But Morlock is, just a stalwart for the Republicans and certainly for conservatives. And so we will be in there to defend John Morlock. In the Assembly, there's some AD 13 was the Eggman seat. That's an open seat. There's two Democrats running against each other. In the Big Bear area, the Obernolte seat, we have two Republicans running against each other there. So it'll be a Republican seat. We just don't know which one will win. Jordan Cunningham in the San Luis Obispo County area always has a tough race, but he seems to do well. Tom Lackey up in Palmdale, he's nested into the Wilkes seat, and he's running against Steve Fox for the third time in his career. Lackey is recovering from COVID, but seems to be doing okay and should be able to hold on to that seat. The Republicans actually are up one in terms of their representation, at least going into the fall in SD 8038. It's Christy Smith's seat. Again, Santa Clarita area seat. Two Republicans running against each other in that seat. Suzette Velardes, somebody the Cal Chamber backs. We like her. Again, a great image for the party. Very, very sharp young lady. Chad Mays, you're probably familiar with. Some of you that follow politics, kind of a fraught individual, nice guy. Good voting record for the chamber, but he's running as an NPP against Andrew Kodiak, who is a Republican. We like Chad. If Andrew Kodiak wins, that's fine too. It's just historically NPPs have not won in California races, and we've tried and not had much success electing them. So I don't know how that'll turn out. Phil Chen in the Yorba Linda area, he's got a challenge from Andrew Rodriguez. Chen also had a real strong showing in the primary, got over 56% of the vote. There's a race in Los Angeles area, Center City, LA. Reggie Jones Sawyer is the incumbent, and he's challenged by actually a local chamber executive by the name of Efrain Martinez. And Martinez actually got more votes. He got 50% of the vote in the primary, and Joan Sawyer got 44. So he beat him by over 5 points. And so we're looking at that race and we're thinking, you know, Sawyer is very liberal, very progressive, which is, again, what you would expect for that area. But Martinez could certainly be that that moderate Dem that we like to back. So we're going to look closely at that race. Stephen Choi down in AD 68 in the Irvine area. Again, this is overlapping with Morlock. Choi's, you know, great vote, good friend of ours, good friend of all yours, I'm sure. Had a pretty good showing in the primaries, running against Melissa Fox, who's a trial lawyer. But I look at the dynamic of the city of Irvine, which is going to have a contested mayor's race, Morlock and Choi, and there's just going to be a lot of activity there, and so that's something that we need to be mindful of and think about how we address that on a more universal basis. AD 72, that's represented by Tyler Deep. He will be leaving. He lost his primary through some of our efforts and the efforts of others to Janet and Wynn. Tyler was the only Republican to vote for AB 5, and so we just felt he was not acceptable, and he will be leaving office at the end of this year. And then finally, in AD 74, the Newport Beach, Laguna Beach district, Connie Petrie Norris is the Democrat. She's running against Diane Dixon. Diane's a very, very talented candidate, probably the best candidate the Republicans have had in that area in a long time. Petrie Norris is a good vote, somebody that we work well with. So we're just kind of keeping our eye on that one as well. And again, when we get to Q&A, I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. And I'll stop there and we can move on. And like I said, I'm here for questions.
Thank you, Marty. A lot of campaign activity, and you only covered part of it. I mean, there's a lot of priorities for the business community. Moving on to Mr. Lapsley. I'm going to let you, Rob, take it away with your topic of choice. I know you guys are covering a lot as it relates to split roll, the campaigns, and then a lot of the policies coming out of Sacramento and how it's adversely affecting the business community. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's always a pleasure to be with my colleagues. I'm actually going to let Mr. Hime talk to split roll. So I'm going to talk to some kind of broader perspectives that we're seeing from Sacramento right now that we want to share, Jeff, with your members. And I first and foremost always have to say, we recognize and appreciate obviously how this industry, but particularly the members on this webinar or the Zoom call, what they contribute to California's economy, because they are trying to maintain their businesses. They are trying to figure out, innovate, obviously, and the incredible uncertainty that this governor is providing under his administration, the lack of clarity, the lack of consistency is frustrating for everybody. And I know it's frustrating, obviously, for the industry. So we appreciate what you do every day in trying to maintain your employees and your customers. And, hopefully we will work out of this. There's no question moving forward. We will recover. We will work out of it. California does. That's our nature. But this is a tough one. So what have we seen since all this was unfolded? And what we are seeing is California has now gone from a essentially 4% unemployment rate to now 14.9% as of just a couple days ago. And most importantly, what we've seen is that and we track all this through the roundtable, when you look at the individual jobs by classification sector, whether it's construction, whether it's finance and insurance, whether it's hospitality and leisure, California has dropped jobs significantly in every single sector except for 2. And one of them is finance and insurance. A large part of that obviously coming from mortgages, but also coming from telecommuting, which we'll talk about. And number 2, government jobs. Now there's a shock. So government jobs has actually increased a little bit, not decreased. We'll obviously let you draw your own conclusions. There's going to be a lot of discussions about that in the months ahead. But when you look at the lower wage job sectors, hospitality and leisure, obviously they're decimated right now. They were the first ones to be cut. They are not going to recover quickly. Everyone, has been speculating on an economic basis. Are we in a V-shaped recovery, or what is this? And, the different descriptions, V, W's, a long drawn out graph line, you name it. But clearly we see now every day that there is no certainty in this. It is going to be kind of it's a W's W, if you will. It's going to be up and down for the next few months as the counties continue to make these decisions with the state government on exactly what they are going to allow from a mitigation standpoint in their numbers or not. The grave concern for us right now is, as they made decisions on school. All of you are, many of you may have kids affected by this, but they have shifted the burden for schools from obviously the teachers to now the parents and the employers. And we recognize what all of you have to deal with when you have employees who now have to look ahead for that whole next semester. Don't think for a second that really any schools, ladies and gentlemen, are going back in this fall. They've made their decisions. They're running a drill. They want more money from the teachers unions, but we will see schools open up January, and then we expect them to all go back. But for the next few months in the fall, they are going to mitigate counties, and they're going to keep kids out of school. So that is what we all have to share as an employer community, the burden to try and ensure our employees can help their kids, but at the same time get our jobs done and meet the demands of your businesses and actually try and move ahead in this economy. The governor, very interestingly, doesn't seem to care about any of this. So I'm going to start being blunt here. We believe in what we see, moving forward. This governor actually is probably the least understanding governor for the business community that we have seen in the last few gubernatorial cycles. How do we demonstrate that? Well, he has bent over backwards to accommodate the unions. In all of his executive orders, we as a business community, everyone on this call, from Mr. Dunmoyer to Mr. Montejano, Marty Calchamber helping to lead, everyone has given him a framework of what business needs to do to be able to maintain their businesses and try and create a foundation to work out of that. The governor's office, the governor, has done nothing to help. And not just nothing, he has not even had discussions on the issues that are the most critical. Liability relief, for starters. Everybody has to comply now with new mitigation protocols. You think that there could be an executive order for 3 months, 6 months that's going to provide some relief, that if you're complying with the protocols in order to provide health and safety for your employees and your customers, that there would be some understanding and some relief. Not only is there not any action, there's not even a discussion from them through his administration and Department of Labor, much less his cabinet. Not even a discussion. So, the focus now, we're working hard at the federal level to hopefully we're working with Mitch McConnell, see if we can get something for California, what happens at the federal level. It's not going to happen at the state level. Every executive order he currently has, be prepared for it to be extended into the end of December. And then we'll see where things kind of go. That particularly applies to rental housing, evictions, and all of these other pieces. We're waiting to see if he does more on workers' comp. But be prepared that they will extend all of this probably at the end of August to go into the end of December, and then start to work out of it after that. From what we have been talking to the governor's office about, again, Mr. Hime will talk about commercial property. But on top of everything else from a policy perspective, again, the governor's done nothing to step in to look at what's coming on the initiative side. So the politics is just as bad as what's happening with the policy. So we have a split roll, we have a rent control measure that's completely unneeded, given everything with the new laws that have been passed and the governor's executive orders, but they do nothing to step in and try and either send a message to stop it or sit down and try and help balance things for business. So that's our biggest concern moving forward. We have given the governor a very strong package, for example, on telecommuting. If we look ahead long term, again, California will come out of this. We will all be in this, together to recover. We will. But how are things going to change? So I'll just close on this. What we see, coming ahead is, we will have a long-term shift for telecommuting, but it will be long-term if the administration helps, along with the legislature, to provide the changes to modernize our employment laws that provide you as employers protections to be able to do this successfully. Right now, they're not even willing to have a discussion. But we will be putting maximum pressure to have that discussion, because it's not just about helping, our employers and employees. It's actually about the benefits that go along with it. It's the greatest single reduction in greenhouse gas if you want a true climate change policy. Because if we shift 20% of the workers on a given day to telecommuting, the impact on the roads, the reduction in GHG, the reduction on wear and tear, gas tax, the benefits are incredible. We don't need a VMT that Mr. Montejano has been working so hard with us on and leading. We don't need a VMT anymore, ladies and gentlemen. We show that, we've demonstrated it, we've documented it. The governor's office is unwilling to listen. They're moving ahead with the VMT policy anyway, rather than shifting to say we have an opportunity here at a crisis to get something done in a completely different way. So with that, be happy to answer any questions. Jeff, thank you for the opportunity to be on with you today, as always.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Rob. And if you thought Rob was direct, wait till you listen to Mr. Rex Hime. Rex, you're up. You're muted, Rex. You're still muted. There you go.
Let me start by saying that BIA at the local level, the state level, are very well represented. And I can tell you that Jeff and Dan are great warriors for you, great representatives, and also, more importantly, great to work with. So let me give you a quick perspective. This June marked my 50th anniversary of working in the Capitol. So I've had an opportunity to watch a lot of changes over the years. Everybody from Ronald Reagan all the way to Jerry Brown twice to the current governor. And so we have a thing that are known as zombie bills. And Dan mentioning AB 168 is a perfect example of that. This is a bill that John Burton carried years ago in an attempt to allow the Native American tribes to basically control development throughout all California. The chamber led a great effort at that point. We came together and we were able to defeat it then. Dan's leading this effort, and I can tell you that we're going to defeat it again. But it's no bad idea ever goes away in Sacramento. If there's a way, people ask me, how do folks come up with these really bad ideas? And I continually remind them that what it is the result of a weekend where the Democrat caucus goes away, does a lot of pot and wine, and then comes back and introduces a bunch of measures. And these are the kind of bills that we're faced with. One of the bills we had to deal with earlier this year, some of you are aware of, was a measure called SB 939 by Scott Wiener. SB 939 would have abrogated every single commercial lease in the state of California, allowed the tenant to stay in those properties for a year, and then walk away without paying anything at all. What in the world, where did that kind of stuff come from? And unfortunately, Rob and Marty and the chamber and Dan and others, we have to deal with this kind of ongoing approach on a regular basis. And then let's talk about a moment for Gavin Newsom. A lot of people said, oh, well, look, the governor is young and virile and he's going to be just great and he looks good. He looks like California. And That's all well and good. And everybody said, oh, look, he's got to be better than Governor Brown. Let me assure each and every one of you that Jerry Brown 2 was better than Jerry Brown 1. And quite candidly, Jerry Brown 2 is much better than Gavin Newsom 1. Jerry Brown cared about California for only one reason, California. I believe that our governor currently cares about California for only one reason, Washington, D.C. I believe that everything he does is aimed at trying to create a situation where he is, as a national, a lot of visual and a lot of presence at the national level. You look at his quote, recovery of economic task force, which is filled with people who really don't care, many people who don't care about California, a handful who do, but they're relegated. Tom Steyer is in charge of trying to bring back the economy of California. If you believe in the gulag and the Sovietization that occurred in Russia, you then agree with Tom Steyer, what he needs to do to our economy. And we cannot afford to have that happen. There are a variety of measures that are on our ballot this November. Some of them are like, really? And some of them are very meaningful. We have everything from allowing 17-year-olds to vote to the split roll tax, which I'll talk about in a moment. But there's also affirmative action. There's a chance to undo the prohibition against affirmative action. It's been in California since the 90s. There is a repeal of some of AB 5, not all of AB 5. There's a measure to restore the cash bail bond program in California that we had. That program was ended and given basically to the state to handle. So SEIU would have more opportunities for unionization and jobs. That's on the ballot in November. The realtors have a measure that will allow some portability of your base year for property taxes if you want to move out of your home. So there are a lot of really important measures. And then, like I said, some that just are like, are you kidding me? So it's going to be very important that everybody focuses on what happens this November. And now let me just focus like a laser for a moment on on Prop 15. This is a measure that will end and break up and start the destruction of Proposition 13 in California. It takes all of the commercial properties out of the protections of Prop 13, requires at a minimum a reassessment every 3 years, but it can be done more often. It also turns the appeal process on its head. Currently, right now, in law, the burden of proof when you challenge an assessment is on the assessor. If this measure becomes law, the burden of proof falls upon the property owner. So the power of the state is against the property owner. So you can imagine how much easier that'll be to ever win an appeal process. It also gives to the legislature with a simple majority vote to make changes and definitional changes and interpretations of Proposition 13. All of this should be pretty darn scary. It's a $12 billion tax hike, and that's a $12 billion every year, not just a one time. It's supported by the California Teachers Association and the SEIU, Service Employees International Union. Many of you know them as the Purple Shirts. And their goal is to backfill the pensions that they have, which are unfunded. There is no direction of how this money gets spent. There isn't the slightest hint that there'll be more classrooms, the slightest hint there'll be more teachers, none of that. The slightest hint that it'll help local government provide better services, none of that. And so this is a very, very important measure. I know that BIA is part of the coalition. The chamber is part of the leadership, as is Rob, and fortunately myself. And I can tell you that we are right on target for doing what we need to do to defeat this thing. It's a simple vote, it's a majority vote, 50% plus one. And what we have done is we built a campaign that started a year ago and worked all the way through to today. And so far, we're right on track. We brought in the team that defeated the No on the Prop 10 campaign, the rent control measure, and also defeated the Measure E campaign in LA. They're doing a fantastic job. We've been able to bring in the entire agriculture community because despite the fact that the proponents have said it doesn't impact agriculture, this is one of the many myths or flat out lies they propose. It does impact agriculture, and it'll have a significant impact on our food costs. Once again, Californians will be paying for that. We brought in the NAACP, a large number of other Black and African American organizations, as well as all the leading Hispanic organizations in California in opposition to it. We have the largest coalition ever of veterans groups who've come in and joined in opposition to it. And most recently, the California assessors, the folks who know most appropriately how a process like this works, have come out in opposition to it, citing the fact that it'll cost over $1 billion to implement and probably $400 to $500 million annually to continue to process. So they continue to shift what their positions are about why Prop 15 is important. It went from ending the abuses of the commercial real estate industry to the COVID-19 battle, that we need to have more money to go back into our schools and whatnot, to most recently, Prop 13 has contributed to the systemic racism of California. So you can see their messaging is going to be all over and all about trying to bring whoever they can convince to vote for them. And the Democrats believe that this November is a bellwether opportunity for them. There'll be a huge anti-Trump vote. Everybody in the world's getting mailed a ballot, alive or dead. You'll be getting a ballot, which will be able to be cast. The Democrats have been able to effectively capture the marketplace of how best to do what is known as ballot harvesting, which they do very, very well. And they believe all those three factors together will enable them to be victorious in November, not only in passing Prop 15, but potentially passing Prop 21, which is a rent control measure, which we also need to defeat, and of course defeating any of the criminal justice reform proposals that are on to try to make California recognize that things such as trafficking in children for sexual purposes and others is indeed an act of violence, that some other things that have been redefined that have contributed to us letting out now, by the end of August, we will let out 18,000 folks because their crimes were redefined and because we want to deal with COVID-19. So I think we have a lot we have to deal with here in California. Opportunities like this to chat about them and the leadership that you guys have in your industry is really important. But again, I'm happy to take any questions. I'm really honored to have been here and been invited today. I do want to add and close with one final thing, if I may. Watching the news last night, because Rob mentioned education, the teachers in Lodi, the Lodi school district said, okay, look, we're going to do distance learning, but we'd like our teachers to be in the classroom so that when they're on the screen or whatnot, there's a little bit of sense of continuity and there's a belief that children can feel, gee whiz, we had that classroom connection. The teachers are opposed to having to come into their classroom. They want to get their salary, they want to get their pay, they want to get their pensions, they want to get their benefits, but they don't want to have to teach anymore. And it's just crazy and out of hand. But that's the California we live in, and that's the California we got to try to fix. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Rex. Appreciate it. We have a bunch of questions, and we also have some questions that we asked of you all. So I'm going to just try to paraphrase it. We're seeing a lot of things out of Washington in terms of stimulus, small business relief. Is there anything, we know how Sacramento works. Is there anything collectively from all of you, is there anything that's happening from a sense of, I know that California is looking to fund the budget deficit and they're looking on businesses to do that. But is there anywhere, any legislative relief or discussions about relief for businesses instead of just taxing them? Is there any hope in terms of the philosophical direction that Sacramento's headed in, knowing that COVID is a real problem and that businesses do need more relief, not taxes?
I'll go first, if that's okay. Just, again, an important question, particularly as we head into the last month of session, but the answer to that is basically no. Again, the governor should have come out with something. He could do it by executive order. We don't need the legislature, right? He could balance costs on business, recognizing businesses are having to bring on all these additional costs for mitigation measures. So he could have looked at how you looked at workers' comp. He could look at, again, The liability pieces, there's immediate actions on employment law pieces, 8-hour workday, meal and rest, all of these things to give some confidence on how you can be able to adapt your workforce to maintaining your business. None of that. We don't see it going forward at the moment because, again, there's no dialogues going on, even though all of this has been presented to him from all of us collectively. And as Rex mentioned, there's nothing coming from the task force either on this. So they've been in existence now for a couple months. They haven't seen the same thing. You know, just asking for, you know, federal relief. That's not a plan. And there certainly is no urgency. I mean, the urgency is right now was months ago, nothing. So this is where the frustration grows for business. This is why we wanted to share with everyone our perspectives on what we're not seeing happen. And we don't see it happening moving forward while we have to kill off bad bills and deal with major initiatives that are going to further impact our economy and the business community. So we are, fortunately organized and working hard collectively. But it's literally not even one party rule anymore right now this year for sure. It's one union rule in what we're up against.
Yeah, I might just add, Jeff, from the chamber perspective, we have sent a letter to the administration and to the legislature about steps they can take to help the economy rebound as quick as possible. Certainly liability protections that Rob referenced are a big part of that. AB5, contracting out, they should really minimize or eliminate the enforcement there. There's things we need now that are different, whether it's an IT person that can come to your home if you're working remotely, that, they still would have to be classified as employees. Certainly, things that the legislature could do to make it easier for people to telecommute. I mean, we're seeing the advantage of this telecommunication kind of revolution, for want of a better word, and certainly the positive environmental impacts that it's having. But there's still constraints in terms of that are put on employers, and when they do have employees that telecommute. We've asked the administration to postpone for a year the automatic increase in the minimum wage. We'd like to see them pause the creation of non-essential regulations. They're still going through this regulatory process, just like nothing's going on, and imposing more burdens on business. And finally, music to all of your ears, accelerate the construction and permitting of new housing.
I just totally agree with my colleagues, just to go even deeper on the housing side. We've done a couple different things. One, and we kind of have an internal joke, but it's more tragedy than joke, which is one thing that COVID has no capacity to limit or hinder or kill our regulations. And so during this last 100 days, we've seen 5 new sets of regulations step in. Vehicle miles travel has been mentioned. Jeff, we've got tens of thousands of communications to the governor. We did the same at CBIA, over 100,000 communications combined between the two of us, asking for delay, and no delay was granted. Then secondarily, we've got mountain lions, we've got Joshua tree, we've got other species and plants that are being protected, which would greatly impact what's going on in construction in Southern California. Waters of the state, as a counter to the Trump's efforts to deregulate, California double regulated. So, there's not been a single, not only has there not been a single action to incentivize, as Jeff asked, or to create other opportunities in California, there have been aggressive steps to add cost, complexity to the business in general, but housing specifically. And these issues have been articulated in writing, black and white, to the governor scores of times now over the last 100 days without a single response. Well, there's been a response. No, we disagree with you. So the good news is we have a good enough relationship with the governor that he'll tell us he disagrees, but the bad news is he disagrees. And Rob's expressed frustration on the governor is completely and properly founded.
I would just add the fact that Dan, that the CBIA has to run a bill, AB 281, to extend the life of these permits, when that could have been done already by a governor's executive order, underscores every single thing that all the other three folks on this panel just mentioned. There is no taking into consideration when it comes to the business community or the products that we provide or services we provide by this administration on any front.
You know, another example, just, you know, as we try and evaluate this, right, to try and be fair, given our collective experience in working in past administrations. But, you know, you look at the governor needs masks, right? So that's the number one priority, PPE. So yes, there's a program he's working with the California Manufacturers Group to try and do that. But if you eliminated all of the regulatory burdens to have companies switch over to PPE, suspend every single one of them, California could be producing masks that we'd be exporting everywhere, especially when you look at the potential in LA. And do it properly. Yes, socially distance, do all these things, but the reality is there's not even one consideration for that. So they're throwing money at the problem, but they're not looking at how they actually get things accomplished by obviously having to use the tools, some of the tools in their toolbox, and it's just beyond us as to why. So anyway, sorry, to go on too long.
That's good, Rob. Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'll put in context is, you know, when, you know, we had some riots down in Southern California. We had riots back in '92. We had enterprise zones created. You know, we rebuilt those communities. That type of discussion is not taking place, and that's even more scary. You know, what are we going to do to make it right for the cities that experience that and the businesses that will horrifically experience that? I mean, that's a real. Hopefully that we get there. I'm going to take 4 of the questions and wrap them into one preamble answer and then give it to the panel. But we have a question about suspending VMT. Is it real or not? Is there a coordinated strategy to call it the emperor? That was funny. And then also, you know, what are the racial tendencies of some of these policies? And then to the last one I saw there was, you know, looking forward, how do we climb out of this, as Rob mentioned? And I'll just try to answer them all in a real quick preamble. But, you know, VMT is something that, you know, we're working with locally with cities. As long as it's law, we will work on that. We're going to show examples of how it works. In some areas, it won't work. And whether VMT gets suspended or not probably remains to be seen. I'm going to give that to Dan. And then, you know, this is a coordinated effort. I mean, the one thing that we're seeing is that our business coalition is strong. And the way that we climb out of this is for people like you to spread the word, to get on Zooms, to click, and to be more active. You know, the halls of DC and Sacramento are shut down, but policies are still being made. And so we can take a great advantage of using Zoom and using digital advocacy. And that's kind of what we're doing at the BIA. And it doesn't have to be a BIA thing. As long as we get people involved digitally, it doesn't have to be through the BIA. It can be through any one of these organizations, as long as we're collectively working together. And then on the racial tendencies, I mean, there's a group called the 200 run by Jennifer Hernandez. VMT has, there are serious implications on how it affects the middle class and people of color. And that is something that's going to be pursued legally. It's something that we firmly believe in. And that the jury, no pun intended, is still out on that. There was an injunction that was filed, and that is something that we're going to aggressively pursue. So, and then also I'll just conclude on my preamble, is that there are opportunities for everyone to be active, not just giving to a campaign, but there are campaigns, ways you can support these organizations and what we're doing. And split roll is probably the biggest tidal wave that's coming, but you know, digital advocacy and supporting these organizations and increasing the membership or participation is how we're going to climb out of this. So I'm gonna turn it over to Dan, and then we'll go round robin on how I try to answer these questions collectively.
Thanks, Jeff. Great start on that. And I fully agree. So just to drill down a little more on VMT, major effort collectively to try to delay that, put it on hold. I'll just give you a few anecdotes there. Although they've had 7 years, the government, to try to put together some cohesive regulatory strategy, other than the city of Los Angeles, the other parts of the state aren't even ready for this. San Diego put their website out and their calculator. One of the multi-use projects on the coastal region had a $65 million VMT charge for a piece of land that wasn't worth $40 million. It's a mess. we're fully supporting the 200's effort to litigate both the formal lawsuit and the injunctive relief. Just some basic facts. If you, it's 250 pages. Jennifer Hernandez wrote this beautiful brief, but to the issue of racism, the most impacted population in California for VMT are people who live in Inland Empire, who live in San Bernardino, and 76% of them are people of color. The least impacted group are people who live in Santa Monica, there's only 18% people of color. So although this is a very progressive administration, at least self-described, their policies, their environmental policies, have the most negative and deleterious and racist impact on people of color. So even when we have these massive civil unrest talking about we need to stop systemic racism, VMT is on its face, and no matter how you slice it, systemically racist. So Jennifer outlines this beautifully on behalf of the 200. We continue to communicate that. To the question, how do we get this out there more? We are going to continue to work collaboratively with our colleagues here and even a broader coalition that Rex maintains along with the chamber, just to get more people who are in the building and business and shelter industry to talk about these negative impacts. So real efforts there. You know, we are going to continue to keep the voice out there and work with our colleagues here to make sure that happens. Thanks.
Rob, go ahead.
So, you know, we see this across, we believe, multiple policies, you know, again, including education. If there is one community that is disadvantaged in how they are approaching the decisions on some of these policies, it's lower income communities of all colors, you know, particularly in urban areas. It's not the coastal counties that are getting impacted by this. They're adapting their, but when we look at, we're going to lose a whole year of kids, you know, around just the education policies. So we look at, you know, issues like mall closures, which Rex and I have been dealing with. Mall closures in urban lower income communities have a greater economic impact than the open air malls that are fully open and fully doing business in higher income communities. It's like they make all this talk, but there doesn't seem to be practical reality in how some of these things get recognized or addressed. So that's our greatest frustration as we continue to move forward together in trying to address these things. And, you know, we will be pushing hard. The last thing, if I could, just, you know, as we look at all this, when we look ahead to November and what's going to happen with these initiatives, we believe it is, again, going to be one of the most critical outcomes that we as a business community are going to face. Because if this is the way the governor is going to be, one of the few ways we can send a message to him and the administration and some of these unions is to defeat them at the ballot box. And do it in such a way that it's going to send a message to the legislative members that we are organized, united, and that we can move to defeat things if it's real bad. And, you know, if we think this year was bad, we haven't seen anything yet until we get to 21 and what's going to be coming with some of the bills there prior to the governor's reelect. So we have to ensure that we can beat these things, because if we can't, then wait till you see how they try and balance the budget deficit, you know, going into next year if we can't do it this year. So the long-term ramifications here, ladies and gentlemen, are just incredible of what we have to try and achieve to be able to maintain some balance.
Jeff, when we talk about the policies of California that often are totally contrary to what they preach, and you talk about racism, I am struck by two headlines that appeared in the LA Times just last week. The first one was, the LA Times headline was, Hispanics make up majority of UC enrollment for first time. That was really a positive headline. Headline, almost right next to it, but not quite the same day, was court rules that CEQA requires that when schools talk about increased enrollment, they have to go through the entire CEQA process in order to allow for increased enrollment. So here we are making advances in participation of the Hispanic community in our educational system. And I don't remember any time in the past when folks looking like me, you ever had to do a secret document to increase enrollment on a UC campus. It's just kind of craziness that is amplified in all these ongoing little roles that impact negatively the very people that the Democratic leadership talks about wanting to help. Split roll tax will hurt overwhelmingly small businesses and minority-owned businesses. That is horrific. The things are going on in education right now. Distance learning is going to impact the minority community more than anything else. The closure of businesses. I mean, you just tack them up on, and you talk about what Rob and Dan pointed out with the ongoing regulatory impacts. And I'll just, you all have articulated it very, very well, but I will also incorporate the answer to another question that was up there, and that is, if Trump loses in November, should we expect a Newsom-like administration and the kind of things that have gone on here to be implemented at the federal level? Hell yes. Absolutely expect that.
Mr. Wilson, any comments? You're muted, Marty.
Sorry, my phone was ringing. Ironically, it was the chairwoman of the California Republican Party.
We have a cussing delay, so it automatically muted. So now, okay.
No, I think everybody said it very well, and I think we know sort of intuitively and empirically both that we've become a state of haves and have-nots, and the people that are affected by this virus are disproportionately communities of color. They don't have the choices that we have, people that look like us, to work from home and the safety of our home, and they're feeling the impacts, and yet the policies to help them aren't forthcoming, and education being first and foremost. Reading today in the clips about parents kind of organizing pods for their kids to help them get educated. Well, those parents are going to hire tutors, and they're going to hire tennis coaches, and they're going to do all these things to enrich their children's education, which is what they should do. But what about the folks in the more economically disadvantaged areas? They don't have those. They don't have that capability or those luxuries that the folks that they're talking about in this article, and it's going to leave them behind. And have a disproportionate impact on them in the future. And education, is sort of foundational to improving your life. I mean, you have to be educated before you can do anything else. And then and hopefully you go out and you get a job and you buy a home, and you start that moving up that rung on the economic ladder. So we're concerned. We at Cal Chamber see this, and we're very, very concerned about it, and certainly have made our voices known. We'll see how Newsom fares in November. I think he's going to go into a re-election cycle probably as the most vulnerable incumbent, at least in my lifetime, and hopefully there'll be an answer and a better choice for voters in 2022.
Thanks, Marty. I'll give a quick comment and then we'll do closing remarks. But as it relates to the question, if Trump loses and Newsom in DC, I mean, I would look at it more like in the amount of do a comparison of Sacramento and Washington right now. We all know COVID is serious. We take it seriously, but it's our jobs to protect the business community, to protect our industries. So we're not insensitive to that. But as it pertains to that, we are looking at the spike of unemployment continually to go up. And, just like Washington's reacting to the spike to COVID, I have to commend both parties for the speed of what they're doing, because collectively, when you have different leadership in different houses, things move very slowly. But the speed at which they're going is phenomenal. The speed of what California is doing outside of COVID, on the business side, looking at that unemployment spike, we're not really seeing anything from what you've heard from today. So that's the most alarming thing for me, is not one person, but the speed of how we're reacting is not up to speed. It's really very, very slow. So if that carries into Washington by anybody, we're going to have major problems because speed is really critical as we try to counter this. So with that, I'll let Dan go last. Rob, I'm going to let you lead off for final remarks and as we conclude.
So, okay, thank you again for the opportunity to be with all of you today. We obviously wanted to share with you today our concerns, right? We're being blunt. That's what you are leading on in your individual businesses, sectors, your communities. So we want to be blunt with you to try and, have a collective understanding of what we have to do together to be able to move forward. That being said, we always face enormous challenges, from 9/11 to natural disasters, and we always overcome, and we will. But, we want to see strong leadership from the governor and a collective partnership with the legislature, in addition to what happens at the national level, to be able to accomplish that. So that is, our really big challenge, is to try and get that kind of recognition and effort from them to try and help all of you. That's what we are here for. As Jeff said, that's our goal, that's our mission, and we're going to be tireless until we can accomplish that and we build out of this together. But we do focus, as the legislature winds down on November, because that will send a critical message. And with that, we need your help because we're all in that battle today together. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for the opportunity again to have this discussion.
Thanks, Rob. Mr. Hime. You're muted. There you go.
Jeff, let me say thanks very much for this opportunity, and thanks for those of you who put up with us for the last hour. Hopefully you found some of our comments to be helpful. You notice I changed my screen. The message I want you to take away today is that please join the campaign for No on Prop 15. Your involvement, your support, your participation is really critical to us winning in November. And you can not only help with money, but you also can help just by talking to your neighbors, your employees, your folks in Rotary. If this is really an important campaign, and everyone needs to know that if we break down Prop 13, it is the end of California's economy. Jeff, thanks again for today, and thanks for allowing me to be among these titans of industry.
Thank you, Rex. Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, well, hopefully we didn't depress the crap out of you. I think this is what we do for a living. We fight. I think Rex used the term at the outset of our conversation, warriors, and please understand that we're warriors for the business community, and sometimes we feel greatly outnumbered and overmatched, and we are, but we win a lot. And certainly I look at our one of our signal accomplishments or signature accomplishments is our job killer list. If you look at our list of job killer bills, we have a 90% kill rate on those bills. So we do have victories. And so don't be discouraged, although it's easy to do, and participate and fight back, and know that you're not alone, that we're out there fighting with you and for you. And please participate in the elections and vote no on 15, and let's get those Orange County seats secured, and we'll be in a position to fight back in 2021. Thanks, Jeff, for including me. And again, if there's any questions people have, feel free to email me. Thanks.
Thank you, Marty. And last but not least, our fearless leader, Mr. Dunmoyer.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks again for the opportunity to join this August group. And thanks to everybody who joined the call today. Appreciate you engaging, because that really is the message all of us want to leave with you, which is the importance of engagement. I also leave on an optimistic note, because I know we've given you reasons to be pessimistic, but here's some positive reasons why it's great to be in the building community right now. Many of you have had your best month last month that you've ever had in the last 5 years. And so even though COVID really crushed us in the first 45 days, because we stayed essential, because there was a team effort to keep us essential with Orange County BIA and SCBIA, as well as the other BIAs and the building community as a whole, we're starting to see more people looking for shelter and buying shelter. And unlike the last Great Recession, which we went through, Rob kind of outlined the key numbers on unemployment. where we were the last to come out of it, we are now the first to come out of this crisis. And we've seen more hiring of people and workers. We're seeing people who are in other jobs transitioning over to building, because when you can't use a hotel or you can't fly Southwest, maybe you're an engineer that can be an engineer for a builder. So we are very mindful of that. We're really working hard to communicate that, both on a state and a national level. And even though some of the politicians don't get it, the marketplace gets it. And we want to be part of that revolution where we're the first coming out of this crisis. So a lot of positive things can come out of this, and we want to be in the position to take advantage of that on your behalf. And again, I wanted to say thanks to you, Jeff, and your leadership, and for bringing us together to work with the building community to make California stronger for building. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Dan. And for those who want more information, we have posted their websites up. BIASC, we're doing a lot. Our chapters are doing a lot. We got some tough issues in Los Angeles that we're dealing with on inclusionary housing. There's a lot of issues going on in terms of getting projects approved and out in Orange County and the Inland Empire. So if you ever want more information, just ping us. And then I gotta say this before we conclude, or Lucy Dunn will kill me, but to quote her, wear your mask. Or she says your damn mask. So wear your mask, everybody. Please, please, please wear your mask. We're seeing a lot of people not wear the masks, and thanks to Dan and I know our industry is taking it seriously. We didn't initially, but we made a lot of progress on that. So please, please wear your mask no matter what industry you're in. And I want to thank all of you for joining us. I know you guys are going to be busy when the legislature, when and if they get back in, and really appreciate all that you do. So thank you for joining us today. If you have any questions, call our offices, call these guys directly, email directly. We're happy to help. That's what we're here for. Thank you.